Well, let's take a break from politics, right, and talk about the effect of the policies that politics brings. I'm trying to link it one way, but let's talk about tech and startup. Nigeria has such a vibrant tech ecosystem. The startup economy in Nigeria is something to behold. So this morning, we decided to have a round table about it. Let's really have conversations that can push our economy. Let's see how young people are doing great stuff and how we can do better. Even though the older ones are saying, well, we are tech bros, call us tech uncles and tech aunties. So this morning we have joining us Iyin, founding partner, Fund for Africa's Future. Of course, you'll know him, Flutterwave and Della, which he co-founded. Iyin joins us virtually. And right here in our Lagos studio, as you can see, we have Jenny Wokoye, who's the founder and CEO of Clafia. Clafia started as a platform offering primary healthcare to individuals. So she plays in the healthcare sector with a startup. Good morning, Jenny. It's good to have you. And we have joining us, just right next to Jenny, Yinka Dewi, co-founder and CEO of Go Lemon, Lagos-based technology company rethinking how food and groceries move across Africa. It's good to have you, Yinka.
Yeah, nice to be here. Good morning.
And good morning, Iyin. So what we're doing is have Iyin provide a helicopter view, right? Iyin's like that G in the tech ecosystem. He's done great stuff, still doing great stuff with startups. And you guys as well give us what's happening, like breaking news, what's playing out in the tech ecosystem. So I want us to start with your stories, basically, why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of people want to go into tech because it looks glamorous. You know, you get that cool computer. You don't have to wear a suit like all of us, right? So I think that's a seller. But more than that is really the drive. Why are you doing what you're doing? For you, it's the healthcare sector. Why? What pushed you to do that? And then we'll talk about how it is treating you right now.
So for me, I was born and raised in the United States and spent most of my life there. But at some point, I lived in Nigeria for 5 years. And during that period, I experienced either saw firsthand like the challenges of accessing healthcare, either through like a personal experience with me, my parents, or my siblings. So it was just an experience that stayed with me, and I knew that at some point, like as I got older, I wanted to solve for that. So in my systems engineering master's program at Georgetown, I told myself that in this master's program, I'm going to take every opportunity given to me on campus, right? So that's where I started to ideate Clafia. It wasn't supposed to be a company at that time, but because of the opportunities I was taking advantage of, like pitch competitions, kind of like forced me to start, building my company. And then the pandemic came around. I was still working at Amazon, so I was going to school and also working full time. And then I just, the pandemic came around and I just decided that, I would start in 2021 after we got our first investment. But I think another question to answer is another response to your question is why not solve for health? I mean, everyone, no matter where you sit on the economic value chain or whatnot, we all experience the inefficiencies of accessing healthcare, good healthcare and well-being in Nigeria and Africa. And I just felt since I was already on this path of working on it, I should just go ahead and start. And I had the support of my school, Georgetown University at the time. We had gotten our first investment from microtraction. So I just said, hey, let's go do it. So that's essentially why I decided to start.
Interesting. So you're sort of made in the U.S. in some sense.
Yeah.
Yinka, you're made in Nigeria.
100%.
Uniloring. What is your story? I like the blend, actually.
Yes.
The fact that, yes, you're made in the U.S., but you're doing something for Nigeria. Yinka, you're made in Nigeria, doing something for Nigeria. Wow. Whatever the case, just make sure you're doing something for Nigeria. So what's your story?
Go Lemon launched 2024, some 2 years ago. Prior to that, I had spent about 7 years at Paystack building payments in Nigeria. And if you think about tech and even early tech in the context of Nigeria, the payment infrastructure was the foundational step that tech had to take because a lot of things, commerce, etc., will be built on tech. I joined Paystack very early. So what it meant was that it gave me access first view access, or first line access, as you call it, to seeing like infrastructure problem being solved.
Yeah.
And then what he also gave me was access to data, a lot of data. At some point, I think a few years ago, Paystack represented approximately like 2 out of every 4 online payments in Nigeria. So you can imagine how much data that means for me.
Yeah.
Building, seeing people year after year, millions of people use card for the first time to pay online. But a lot of those payments were largely for financial services. So the first few years in Nigerian tech was very heavy into building the foundations of financial services. So you have the Paystack, the PiggyVest, lending, and betting. But what it also would show was a big opportunity for one of the big drivers of any economy, which is commerce, right? The data that I had access to show that, I mean, in the country that we live in, about half of every household was spending their earning on food, groceries that they eat in a house, things that they used to tend for their homes.
I can testify to that.
Exactly.
We all can.
Right. And only a fraction of those payments, if any at all, was happening online. So what we're seeing was that Nigerians were adopting digital payments, paying online, but while they were spending half of their earnings on food and groceries, they were spending none of that with the way that they were getting familiar with payments. So what that showed was that there was an opportunity to extend or build on top of the payment infrastructure that Paystack and a lot of other companies had spent time building. And that really is or was the trigger point for me and for the team. Look at the data, understand what the next phase of evolution of Nigerian tech was going to get into. Commerce was one of it. And what better way to tap into commerce than 50% of people's earnings?
Smart. So use data. Let's go to Iyin. We'll come back to where you're at right now. But I want to go to Iyin because, I mean, if you guys refer to the founding fathers in a sense, or at least those who started early, Iyin would naturally be one of them. And Iyin, it's good to have you on the show. We had to bring you out for this all-important conversation, so thank you for joining us. I mean, listening to their story, you probably see yourself in them. You probably reminisce when you started, where you're at right now. But some have said that, are we losing that startup edge in Nigeria? Is it too saturated? So maybe you just walk us through the milestones that we've had and where we're at right now with tech and startup. Are there still opportunities in that sector, or it's saturated, we should move on to something else entirely?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the program, and I hope that you can hear me.
Oh, yes.
If you can't, just let me know. Okay, fantastic. Well, I mean, the thing about startups is that so long as there are challenges, there will always be a need for people to solve them, and very quickly, because of the kind of country we live in. And so there can never be a question of saturation. And it's people like Jen and Mr. Adewi over there that are basically driving the next generation of innovation. I do think that at the heart of everything, however, I know Mr. Adewi said payments, but it's really talent, right? That is what is driving Nigeria's tech ecosystem, and that is what distinguishes our tech ecosystem from tech ecosystems elsewhere in the world. Our tech ecosystem is built on raw talent, people like Jen who live wherever they are in the world and come with their experiences and with their networks, and people like Mr. Adewi who also are homegrown and you know, build on a broader set of experiences that are local and understand the people's context and why they make the local decisions that they do. That's what makes our startup ecosystem tick. I think of myself as a mixture of the two, because I was homegrown in Nigeria up until I went to university, and immediately after I finished my bachelor's degree, I came right back into the country and gained even more context, and that helped me to build the companies that I built today. But I think one of the more exciting trends really is AI. AI is the greatest platform shift that we've had since the internet, and it's going to completely change how everything is built, which creates even more opportunity for us to also build new things. But it also requires us to make investments in new talent, in new tools, and in new infrastructure that can enable the next wave of startups to be built. And in many ways, the foundation is already set. We have a great talent layer. We have fantastic payment and commerce infrastructure, thanks to the work of people like Mr. Dewi and Jen. And now I think what we need to overlay on that is a whole bunch of intelligent, talented young people that are AI ready, so they can even build companies cheaper and faster. So I think this is the most exciting period in the startup universe. It's going to be cheaper to build companies. It's going to be faster to build companies. It's going to take less people to build companies, so there will naturally be more companies. And we're going to be able to build companies that can go to scale really quickly. And so I think that's really the exciting part of everything.
That's interesting. You make me, in fact, infectious. You make me want to consider, what idea I could even introduce as a startup myself. But 2026 is different from when tech startups began in Nigeria. I'm wondering what the unique challenges are in 2026 for Nigerian startups. And in that space as well, are the challenges the creative ideas too for new tech ideas? I want to start with you, Iyin.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest challenge the ecosystem faces, and I'll be very point blank about it, is talent. Every other challenge pales in the face of talent, and especially talent that can help the ecosystem rise to the occasion that is artificial intelligence. And that was why, I actually had to put down my investor coats and jump back into the ring to help build a national network of AI-ready talent with Learn to Earn, where we're training. Our goal is to train 1 million AI engineers over the next 10 years. We started with 750 across Lagos, Abuja, Otupo in Benue State, and in Ilorin. And we're opening up a new campus in Port Harcourt and Ekiti very shortly. There's going to be a need for a lot of speed with solving this problem, because the reality is that the existing talent pool that we've groomed over the last 10, 15 years is completely inadequate to meet the challenges of our future. And specifically in the creative space, I actually think there's a future where you start a startup where you don't have to work for channels anymore, and you can build your own news channel with all the sophisticated gadget just working off your phone, AI in the background. So, I definitely think you should consider that. I can see it very clearly in you and Coyote's future for that fact.
Because I'm reporting you to HR.
Well, I'm glad you reported yourself as well. All right, let's bring it to Jenny and the young man here. I want you to speak specifically to inflation and the challenges of 2026 and how it's affecting startups from your own experience. Jenny, I'll start with you.
So, speaking specifically for healthcare, there's challenges that affect startups or healthcare startups. And I would say definitely inflation is one of them, right? So if I start to think about how that affects affordability of healthcare, it does so in many ways. So about 90% of Nigerians pay for healthcare out of pocket. And for someone who lived in the United States, if I were to pay for healthcare out of pocket, about 90% of Americans have health insurance. But if I was to pay for healthcare out of pocket, I would be in bankruptcy. So would other Americans, right? With health insurance, even as someone who had health insurance in the United States, paying $300 a month for health insurance, it was still relatively expensive. Now bring that to Nigeria, where most are paying for that out of pocket, and you have inflation that is now going to drive the rise of healthcare. What that means is that most people will just not be able to continue to afford healthcare, and that leads to a slew of things. You have a very sick population. You have people who are not able to contribute to the GDP and growing the economy of Nigeria. And so if we don't solve for the affordability of healthcare, or just for these economic like crises such as inflation or devaluation of the naira, which is I feel like it's improving little by little, or just like manufacturing of like medications, our healthcare talent. We're just going, or just basic infrastructure, right? Primary healthcare centers and power. We're going to continuously be in this scenario where like you have healthcare startups who want to build, who are excited to build in our space, but are finding it very difficult to because there isn't like an enabling environment that would help them grow or like help them grow quickly as, you know, a startup should be growing in that sense. So yeah.
Ika, what about you? Taxes, how are they affecting startups?
I think in many different ways, but when you think about for businesses like GoLemon, for individuals that have to think about like the tax for business as well, that have to think about like different types of tax. First is that there's a need for a lot of familiarity and understanding of how the tax laws work. There's some resources out there in the open, but you find many businesses having to seek for and sought for understanding of how these things privately, how they impact their business. It takes them away from the work that they want to do. So there's a general need for information, correct information to be available, readily available for business owners, so that they can use to improve the business and how it runs, as well as they can educate and also explain to their customers how it impacts them in the way that they interact with their business. So there's a need for a lot more or easier access to the understanding of how these laws work, policies, regulation, especially in the context of tax, like you mentioned.
Let me take it in, you know, we know you as, there are many things we can call you. So let's leave it at godfather of this business for now. And for me, I think independently, as startups, as all of these businesses, all of these guys you're raising and the people within that ecosystem, there's a bright future. That is not in doubt. I'm more interested in public policy areas. And this question is directed at you because all of these great minds, all of these things they're building can be messed up by one reckless public official who comes up with one reckless policy and it's over. So, two questions in one. What are you doing as a person or within the ecosystem to see how we can hold a better conversation on how to better manage our electoral process? The reason I brought politics in is because no matter what you do, the people don't trust in their country, and how they choose their leaders is a problem. The issue around corruption as well, because we can build system for health, we can build system for transportation, logistics, all of these fantastic things. Because what is tech? Tech is basically provide access and make it affordable as much as possible. But the other part of how we can bring in this innovation into public spaces like election management, you know, managing issues around corruption, it's not as high as we expect, if you get my drift. What are you doing in terms of intervention in that area?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say, personally, I'm not called to the election management space, but I do know what other members of the tech community are doing. And what I would tell you authoritatively is that a lot of the innovation that you've seen in our electoral processes, which have greatly improved since 2007. I'm sure all of you remember Maurice Iwu and the absolute shame of an election that was. And where we are now, you understand, it has been driven primarily by technology and people in the technology community who have devoted their lives to ensuring that we actually have a free and fair electoral process. Any progress that you see, APC card PVC card readers, you know, all these other innovations that you see, they've been made possible by collaboration with the tech community. And I know people who, for their safety, I would have mentioned, that are driving this change. Now, the latest obstacle at the table is transmission, right? That is really the crux of the electoral conversation. And that is going to rest on something very important that the entire tech community is rallying behind the minister to push very hard, which is broadening our connectivity and broadband infrastructure. Not just because it's necessary for almost every facet of society today, but also because the reality is that without broad connectivity, the fail-safe, the sketchy fail-safe scenario that everybody is imagining, that the politicians want to use as a backdoor for rigging the elections, will become a reality. So I feel like everybody should be pushing the minister's broadband plan, the $2 billion plan to get fiber to every single ward and every single polling booth. Because once that happens, then we're in a situation where the politicians' fail-safe excuse disappears and everybody can have the results transmitted in real time.
Let me come to you. I won't bring you into politics.
Thank you.
I'll leave that for you. I'll leave that for you.
I'm not a politician. I'm a pastor. Please forgive me.
Let me bring Jenny in. And I've been looking at the site and some of the things you do. I know you've explained it in passing, but for those who think maybe this is like an HMO, in that sense, is that what it is, or is it a bit more than that?
No, Cloudflare is not an HMO. I like to think of it as reimagined HMO, health financing. So essentially what we did in 2023, we got to a crossroads where we found we were encountering two challenges in the market. One, obviously, being affordability. The second being fragmentation of healthcare services. So in Nigeria, I like to think of we having like 200 million healthcare systems because everyone has their own way of accessing healthcare. And that leads to a lot of fragmentation, right? So we had to make a choice. Did we want to become a health insurance company, or did we want to do something different? And we decided that we would kind of just build upon the existing behavior of Nigerians who are actually paying for healthcare out of pocket, but still do not understand health insurance or HMO, or don't trust it for because they don't think they'll get their claims will be processed. Why don't we help those people who are actually still paying for healthcare out of pocket make it more affordable and accessible? So we combined financing and health technology, where we created health savings accounts where our customers, they save money on our platform, they earn interest, and then they can use it to access healthcare on our same platform. So we've aggregated 3,000 health and wellness partners from the likes of MedPlus, HealthPlus, and then health and wellness, so iFitness, Oriki Spas, just any like name brand, SynLab, AfriGlobal, any name brand that you can think of.
And the hospitals as well.
Hospitals as well. Healthy Foods, so Fresh, Adidas, like they're all on our platform.
What about Mamakwe, Amala?
No, you can't. Well, you can't buy that on our you can't get that on our platform. And where our customers can walk into any of these partners and use their HSA as a form of payment to pay for these services, they can also buy health insurance on our platform as well, and get like a discount, so up to 30%. So in total, we help our customers save about 40% of their out-of-pocket spend. Ultimately, our goal is that we can leverage AI to help personalize the experience of our customers accessing healthcare, knowing that we all have our individual needs when it comes to healthcare. So we already see how you're spending on our platform. We already see how you're accessing healthcare and the kind of healthcare you're accessing. And so we want to be able to leverage AI to curate a different kind of health plan. So that's really what our end state would be.
Yinka, let's talk about, your success stories.
Yeah.
Iyin is a success story. Now we're talking success stories. So I don't know what data is available to show us how many people drop by the wayside. Football, they will say out of 100,000, maybe less than 5 were able to make it to the Premier League, for instance. What is the number saying with yours? I'm asking that question so that we can help people to just keep striving and not give up.
Yeah, I think it's a journey more than there's a final stop to filter out who are the success stories. And a lot of people, or pretty much everyone in the journey, can be or are part of a success story, if you think of it that way. There are a lot of challenges that we face in Nigeria, where poor people, a lot of people, talents, like you mentioned, are even going out, leaving the country. But what we also see is that in the society that we live in, with all of the challenges that we have, is also the market. Is also a reflection or a mirror of the opportunities that exist. So there are many different people in many different ways that are building, that are using tech, because what tech is, like you said, starting with internet was a leveler. With AI now is also a leveler for us to be able to play at the same level or a similar level with the rest of the world, right? So there are many different people who are building many different things in the context of infrastructure or also services that allows for like the Nigerian people to live just like a little better, like a better life. And everybody in that journey is part of a success story. And that's the way that I see it. So there are many different signals that we may want to like touch points on or see to define what success is. But I think that even for the most obviously successful like tech companies in Nigeria, it's also not just like a full stop, because the scale here, the opportunity here is massive, bigger than what many of us have achieved yet. If you think about, for example, the space that GoLemon play in, almost 100% of grocery commerce or food commerce in Nigeria at the moment is offline. Almost 100% of it is they're in person. People go to the market.
They want to feel what they're buying.
Feel what they're buying.
Which one is good and which one is bad.
But we also talk about inflation. We talk about how more expensive it is for that person to go to the market. So it's not just about the cost of the food that they buy. It's that they have to pick a keke from their house and pick a bike. But not only that, go to 2-3 different stops to pick the things that they need in their homes.
So does GoLemon take off the transportation from them?
Exactly. That's the value that we
and they haggling too. We don't have to haggle. Say
Exactly.
100 naira, you go all the way to 20.
Exactly, and that's the opportunity that we're taking advantage of. We're trying to build for, like building the infrastructure that allows us to move food efficiently, like across from the start to the end, shrink the supply chain such that the journey from the source to the end customer is shorter, and we can maximize all of the gains from collapsing that multiple stop to giving customers like small price or affordable pricing for goods without having to jump around.
Okay, Vai, you the floor to Kayode. Maybe add to Iyin. This is for you in addition to whatever Kayode wants to add. It crossed my mind. Why can't we build our own social media?
Oh, some players already in that space.
I mean, real social media. I mean, I'm comparing it with what we know.
Okay.
The Facebook, the YouTube, all of that. That's what I mean.
So that's going to be the last question as we wind down. But I want you to do this for me, not for me, for us. For someone reports me to HR. How do you know when to start? How do you know when to stop? How do you know when to pivot to something else? How do you know when to just say, you know what, let me go and learn. Let me hide under an organization that is working in that sense. Because for a lot of people, it's hard to know what the phases are. Is this a time where I should stop or put more effort or borrow more money, family and friends to put into it? Is this a time for me to pivot to something else? Is this a time for me to maybe go and learn, go back to school? Is it time for me to fast and pray, you know, and bind village people? So how has it worked for you? And to Yinka as well.
You know, to be honest, I didn't have like a clear cut like time when it was like, okay, this was the time for me to stop or start, or like this was the time for me to learn. I think everything was just happening all at once. I don't know if that's really helpful, but from my experience, right, like my last place of formal employment was Amazon AWS. Why I am so thankful to have worked there is because I think of Amazon as the biggest startup in the world. They have, I think, like maybe 17 leadership principles, and their number one leadership principle is customer obsession. So, like
customer
obsession.
Oh, right.
So, like everyone is like obsessed about the customer because you're living and dying by the customer. You want to solve their needs, and that was one. At the time when I was working at Amazon, I didn't even understand it for myself. But for someone who is building my company, like I completely understand why you need to serve your customers well. Because at the end of the day, if you do not get any kind of funding, from either VCs, family and friends, or debt, like they will serve as your source of funding for you, and you have to serve them well to extract that value from them. So that was like my learning period. For me to start, like I don't know if I started at the right time. I just decided that, at some point I wanted to start. I had gotten to a point where like we had just received our first check at Microtraction. And even at that, when we got the check, I told myself if they invested in us, I would quit my job at Amazon.
How much was it?
It was $25K. USD.
All right.
And I told myself, yeah, I would quit my job, at Amazon. And they invested and I quit. Like, some people would say, like, save some more money, which is what I have been doing. So I have been saving money, not to quit, but I had just been saving. So I felt like I had enough savings to sustain myself, even if I didn't raise any more capital after $25,000. So that's when I started.
Because of time.
Okay.
Because of time.
Okay.
So this is not the end of the conversation. I'd like to take Yinka, also speak to those who are in their 30s, 40s, and thinking, can I sneak into this startup ecosystem? Because you guys may be starting in your 20s, I believe. And then we'll end with Iyin. Hopefully help us see the frontiers, what the new opportunities are. Is it defense tech or security tech? Is it social media that Jeffrey talked about? That's the game plan. We have 3 minutes to do this. So Yinka, you first. Then we'll
to be honest, for as long as, like I mentioned before, for as long as we have challenges, especially at the scale that we face as a society, the opportunities are there. And that is the trigger, or that is the opportunities should be the trigger for anyone to start or get into anything. The most important thing is to validate that while there's an opportunity, like you are attempting to solve for a real problem. For as long as you're solving for a real problem, and you can get validation for what you're doing, then that really is what keeps you going. So if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, as long as you can validate that the ideas that you have fix a real problem that we have, because we have many of them here. That really is the trigger for anyone to get into tech or to build solutions for the problems that we have.
Not too young to tech.
No, not too young to tech.
Something like that. Iyin, your final thoughts on the frontiers, the opportunities now.
I don't know what I can add to the brilliant comments that they've both made, because it's essentially the right mindset, right? The first thing is, what I would say right now, if you're in your 30s and 40s, the perfect time to launch out, because you probably understand something about the customer that many people in your organization don't. There's a lot of people who own big companies in this country who, quite frankly, have lost touch with the customer. They don't really understand what the new age customer is looking for. So I think if you're in your 30s and 40s and you understand something about the customer that other people don't, now is the time to launch out and prove that understanding of the customer, because it's the customer obsession that really drives the success. As for social media, I think there are people that are trying new things. I think our very good friends at Arise are doing Leke, and I'm sure maybe Channels will try its own version. There's room to even distribute new media products. I don't think anything is impossible now in the age of AI. So I really think you should give it a shot if you think it's a great idea. I'll be very happy to have that conversation with you offline if you want to start a company in social media.
There you go. This has been revealing on so many levels, but wait for it. You'll find out very soon. And yes, we'll be having that conversation. We'll be speaking with Iyin Aboyeji, founding partner, Fund for Africa's Future, co-founded Andela Flutterwave. He says he's back in the trenches now, so he's both investor and I don't know what to call you now. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Investor and builder.
Investor and builder, yeah. So that's it. And we've also had Jenny Wokoye, founder and CEO of Clafia. Thank you for your time in the healthcare sector. And Yinka Dewi, co-founder and CEO, Go Lemon in the groceries subsector. Thank you, Yinka.
No,
thank you, Jenny and Iyin. Good to have you and wish you the very best.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
We hope you're inspired to do great stuff. But we'll draw the curtains right now and go do the work, right? I'm Kayode Okikelu. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Well, speaking of inspiration, I just may be looking out for K-Tech, but I promise I won't tell HR. We'll be back tomorrow with the home stretch. I am Bukola Koka.
Sunrise Daily is up next. We'll do our best to make Nigeria better. I'm Jeffrey Zama. Bye-bye.